User-centered design. Week 2. Today's learning objectives. 1. To understand the importance of identifying the correct users. 2. Learn to identify users and work with them towards a design objective. 3. To understand ethics for research involving human participants. 4. Learn to identify and define tasks. Identifying and working with users. Why? Imagine you've been asked to study an existing product or interface, maybe to redesign the interface, research a product interface soon to be created. You need to answer the following questions. Who are your users? What might they do with your product? What do they think is important? Defining users. What is a user? What problem will your product solve? Whose problems are those? Identifying a user. How do you know who will be using your product? Remember that users are anybody that will be gaining value from your product by completing a task within your product. Identifying a user. How many groups of users will your product have? Determining this could be more difficult than you think. Consider ozpost.com.au. Who are the user groups? How would you classify them? By type of business. Value of business. By tasks. Let's begin with user characteristics. Instead of trying to encompass each and every possible user, let us paint a picture by using attributes. Each user has attributes and there is a spectrum for each attribute. Personal attributes. Age. Gender. Ethnicity. Are there more? It is your call to decide if this matters, or if they are set in stone. However, they can help when you create personas. Other attributes. Skills. What sort of skills are required when interacting with your product? If you are building a website, your user should have the basic knowledge to use a browser perhaps. What sort of specialized skills is required beyond that? Playing a video? In fact, what sort of prior experience is expected of your users? Back to the example of ozpost.com.au. It assumes that users will be familiar with drop-down menus, and able to learn a simple navigational pattern. You need to be able to manage your expectations. Other attributes. Domain experience. Your users expected to have domain experience. What is domain experience? For example, if you are designing a food finder website, do your users know words like Japanese cuisine or tapas? In addition, your users may have prior experience with your competitors' products. This may create their expectations of your product. Finding users. How? 1. Questionnaires. 2. Interviews. 3. Observations. 4. Competitive evaluation. Identify product. Ascertain users. And get access to them. Why are we looking for users? Because that is what UCD is about. We get the users involved from the start. We may not make design decisions based on their input, but it is better to be informed than to make assumptions. Finding users. If we are already giving out surveys, haven't we found them? Often, not. A huge reason for the surveys, interviews, and observations is to find the right people. And finding the right users could either make or break your design. Finding users can sometimes be difficult to pinpoint if your base is too broad or inaccessible. Example, a very casual mobile game application. Who exactly will play it? The key is to involve your users early and define them. Oh, everybody could play my game. Is this assumption correct? No. How does that help design the interface for your game? Lessons from an academic study. Reference from Kujala, S., and Kaupinen, M. 2004. Identifying and selecting users for user-centered design. In Proceedings of the Third Nordic Conference on Human-Computer Interaction, pp. 297-303. ACM. Steps to identify and select users. 1. Brainstorm a preliminary list of users. 2. Describe the main user characteristics, including market size. 3. Describe main user groups and prioritize them. 4. Select typical and representative users from the groups. 5. Gather information from the users and redesign the user group descriptions according to the new information gathered. Identifying and defining tasks. What is a task? A task is work that needs to be done. Cleaning your room, for example. But what does it mean in UCD? How do we break it down? First, what is the goal of the task? In our previous example, obviously is to have a clean room. Next, how do you arrive at the goal? Are there multiple ways to do it? Do you hire someone to clean it for you? Or do you design a robot slave to do it? Cleaning it yourself is obviously too old school. Okay. So what are the steps or subtasks involved? Assuming you did it the normal way, you would check to see if you have cleaning materials and tools. This is a precondition for the task. It needs to be met before proceeding to the next step. So for a more relevant example, say you are designing email software. A precondition to sending an email is for the user to have already logged in. A subtask could be for the user to key in the recipient's email address. Defining tasks. Next, you will need to define it. Where exactly would the task be performed? How often do you think would be expected to be performed? How long should it take on average? But more importantly, how is the task learned? How would a fresh user understand your design? Is it intuitive? Refer back to identifying your users and their expectations. Also, what could go wrong? This is a loaded question because it is very easy to make assumptions all over the place. For example, what happens if the user spills mac and cheese onto his keyboard while trying to upload a video? Relevance. Who else is involved? Does that task require the involvement of another user? Or another piece of software? What are the risks? All being said and done. It is all very well if you sit down and think about the tasks that you think your users should complete. But start talking to your users at the same time, because some users would ask you, why would I do that? They may surprise you in some ways. User research methods. What UX methods to use and when? Requirement stage. Who are the users and customers? Survey. Persona. Contextual inquiry. Stakeholder interviews. Competitive analysis. Quality function deployment. What are users trying to do? Task analysis. Top tasks analysis. Three-dimensional framework. Attitudinal versus behavioral. Qualitative, formative versus quantitative, summative. Context of use. Surveys. And the challenges. You fill so many out. Tempting to think you know how to write them. Creating a useful and reliable survey is an art form. You not only have to know which questions to ask, but how to frame the questions using concise and impartial words. Survey. Coverage error. Do you get to everyone using your system? Sampling error. Non-response error. Survey the correct people, but what if not all answer? Measurement error. People don't answer accurately. Measurement error. Ask factual questions people often answer themselves. Generally no problem. Ask questions people need to think about. The way you ask the question could influence the answer. Social desirability. Answer so as to be viewed favorably. Self-administered. Interviewer. Acquiescence. Bend to the view of the question. Individuals are more to blame than social conditions for crime and lawlessness in this country. 60% agreed. Social conditions are more to blame than individuals for crime and lawlessness in this country. 57% agreed. Surveys recommendations. Preference for multi-choice over free text. Why? Here are 15 examples of useful user feedback questions. 1. Would you recommend less than website product greater than to a friend? This is a great way to find out what users' opinion of a website or product is. After all, someone is unlikely to recommend something that they don't rate themselves. Rather than just capturing a yes or no response, consider providing yes, I'd recommend it because, and no, I wouldn't recommend it because, as possible answers with text boxes below each, or show the relevant text box on answer so that you can also find out why users would or would not recommend it. 2. How would you describe less than website product greater than in one or more words? This is a good question for capturing perceptions of a website or product. You could allow users to enter their own words or choose one or more from a list, such as the 118 used in Microsoft's product reaction cards, Word. A good way to analyze the results of this question is to use a word cloud generated using a service such as Wordle. 3. If less than website product greater than were a car, what car would it be? A bit of a wacky one, but by asking users to compare your website or product to something else, you can investigate the perceptions of it. For example, do they compare it to a beautiful and desirable Aston Martin DB9 or a bland and boring Toyota Corolla? Sorry Corolla drivers out there. 4. How does less than website product greater than compare to less than competitor greater than? A great way to investigate the strengths and weaknesses of a website or product is to ask users to compare it to something similar that they have used. In addition to asking how the two compare, you might also ask, which do you prefer, to find out more definitively how your website or product stacks up to the competition. 5. If you were to review less than website product greater than, what score would you give it out of 10? With most online shoppers being familiar with customer reviews and ratings, why not ask users to review your website or product? You could ask for an overall rating or ask them to rate specific areas. I prefer to use a 10-point score rather than 5 points because it gives participants more flexibility. It's also a good idea to ask, why have you given this score, so that you find out the rationale for a rating. 6. What do you find most frustrating about less than website product greater than? A lot of websites and products focus on piling on more and more features, rather than ensuring that existing features work really well. Asking what currently frustrates users is a great way to investigate how existing features can be improved. You can ask what users find most frustrating, or alternatively ask for their top 3 frustrations. 7. Overall, how easy to use do you find less than website product greater than? Standard usability questionnaires such as CSUQ, SAS and QUIS are really good for evaluating the usability of a website or product, but can be quite lengthy. This is a good single question for investigating the usability of a product or service. Possible answers could be very easy to use, neither easy nor difficult to use, and very difficult to use. Also, consider asking, why is this, if a user selects either difficult to use or very difficult to use, so that you can investigate the reasons behind this a little further. 8. Why have you come to less than website greater than? Even with analytics, it can be difficult to work out what users are coming to your website for. Is it to find out some information, to carry out a transaction, or something you've not even considered? In addition to asking why users have come to your website, you might also want to ask, were you successful, and what problems did you experience? This allows you to also investigate how well the website supported someone's goal or task. 9. If you could change one thing about less than website product greater than, what would it be and why? This is a great question for unearthing major frustrations or feature omissions. Asking for one thing forces users to consider what is most important to them. You could alternatively ask for up to 3 things that someone would like to change. 10. What features could you not live without? This is a good question for investigating killer features. Analytics will often tell you which features are most popular, but not necessarily which are most important to users. 11. What do you like best about less than website product greater than? Along with finding out what needs to be improved about a website or product, don't forget to also find out what currently works really well. After all, you don't want to inadvertently change something that users currently really like. 12. What do you like least about less than website product greater than? A good complement to asking what users like best about a website or product. For this question, you could either ask what users like, or alternatively ask for their top 3 dislikes. 13. Which features could you live without? 37 Signals, in their rather splendid book Getting Real, which incidentally can be read online for free, state that when it comes to feature selection, more isn't the answer. Sometimes the biggest favor you can do for customers is to leave something out. I couldn't agree more, which is why it can be a really good idea to find out which features might be pruned from your website or product. 14. How can we improve less than website product greater than? Send us your ideas and suggestions. This is a great question for getting general user feedback, together with feature ideas and suggestions. You might even want to think about setting up a follow-up customer feedback forum, using a service such as UserVoice. This allows users to vote on ideas and suggestions that have been submitted, so hopefully you can find out which is likely to be most popular. 15. Anything else you care to share or get off your chest? This is a great last question, as it gives users the opportunity to sound off about anything the survey may have missed and made it clear that you're interested in listening to them. Just don't take any rants too personally. The Likert scale features a range of responses. For example, the Learning Hub is easy to use. Strongly agree. Agree. Neither agree nor disagree. Disagree. Strongly disagree. NASA Task Load Index, NASA TLX. Rating scale widely used for assessing workload. Commonly used in aeronautical interfaces. Interviews. Interviews are more expensive than a survey, as it requires a higher time commitment from both the developer and the user. Compensations for the users are sometimes given, which adds to the cost. Some interviews are blind, as in random samples are chosen, while a targeted interview will first use a survey to identify targeted users. Why interviews then? Offers a more detailed response. Able to pick up body language and tone. Able to dig a little deeper if encountered an interesting response. Types of interviews. Formal, structured interviews. Informal, unstructured interviews. Contextual inquiries. Informal interviews. Ideal when you are still exploring the problem space. Leaves you space to change and alter questions on the fly. A good idea when you have no clear directions as to what to ask. Have a conversation with the user. Formal interviews. Directed approach, when you know exactly what you would like to uncover. Has specific questions, i.e. you wish to know if the navigation panels are actually working and intuitive. Scripted and can be quicker. Avoid deviations. Measurement error. Interviewer bias often incorporated in leading questions. The use of leading questions can lead to skewed opinion surveys. Leading questions lead to bad data. Contextual inquiries. Main difference from previous two is that you engage the users in their environment where they are using your product. This is especially important for applications in static environments, i.e. kiosks. Even if your product is a mobile application, for example, it would actually be beneficial to interview them when they are most liable to use it, i.e. on the streets or in a tram. Research ethics. Ethics in user tests. Pressures on a user. Performance anxiety. Feels like an intelligence test. Comparing self with other participants. Feeling stupid in front of observers. Competing with other participants. What to do? Does your experiment involve human participants directly or indirectly? Research must be approved by an ethics board. Boards will ask: are participants identifiable or re-identifiable? If some form of deception is involved. Are participants aged less than 18 years? Are participants cognitively or emotionally impaired? Do participants belong to a cultural minority group? Or do participants consider themselves to be Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people? Does the procedure used in the research involves any experimental manipulation or includes the presentation of any stimulus other than question asking? Are the questions asked to include personally sensitive and/or culturally sensitive issues? Is there a power dependency relationship between researchers and participants, e.g. the doctor-patient or teacher-student relationship? Selection of tasks and participants. Time and location of the test. Use of participants' personal information. Presentation of results. Data, will it be stored in a secure location? It is stored for 5 years after the publication of research findings. Only the researchers will have access to the data. Treat users with respect. Time, don't waste it. Comfort, make the user comfortable. Informed consent, inform the user as fully as possible. Privacy, preserve the user's privacy. Control, the user can stop at any time.